Good morning, everybody. I'm Amanda Kinchla. Welcome to the Preventive Controls Working Group. Whoop, whoop. I know we are small. I'm going to rant a little bit in terms of, this is a smaller but mighty group, and we're hoping to really work with you all. One, we want to raise awareness, and we had some discussions yesterday about trying to raise stronger awareness to our target audience of small processors affected by FSMA. Most of these groups are qualified exempt. And so the standing working group has been myself, who we got Annie Fitzgerald over here, Andrea Gilbert over here, let's see, Beth Demings, Nicole Richard, and David Seddon in the back have been, and Luke, he's in the proto side right now, I think. I've been trying to actively create strategies to improve our access. And so we're going to start right out of the gate with Annie Fitzgerald, who we hinted to you all yesterday that we created a new tool. And actually, do you have the postcard? We have these postcards that we've been trying to just pull anytime we see a new user that might find this tool helpful. So thank you, Vanna White. So we're going to start off this morning with Annie showing you this tool, but the intention here is that, I don't know about you all, but like I want my street cred for the thing that I built, so I house it at UMass, because I need that for our stuff, and then Beth's got some great stuff at Cornell, etc. But a small processor does not care who made the thing. They can't find the thing, and so we made a thing that they could find all the things. So take it away, Annie.
All right, so Annie and I are going to co-present on this morning, so I'm going to hit it off and give you sort of a background history of where we've been. So, it's green goes forward. It's pretty easy. All right, I always like to start with acknowledgments because I think this is the most important thing, or the people who are involved with helping to do the work and get this done. And we have on that first left-hand panel is the subgroup participants for resources, which is this working group which helped to produce this product. And we've had a lot of players involved in this, especially early on when we were developing the idea and turning this into a full-blown project, developing objectives, and then carrying them through. So I'd like to recognize all of the people who were involved with that. We also have all of our working group members, which Amanda just listed off. And so we meet monthly to help keep projects going, and then to check in on our progress, make sure that we are pushing things forward and accomplishing the objectives that we've set. It's sometimes slow-paced, but we are getting to the point where we're actually being able to put some of these products out. And so I'm excited to see where we're at. And then, of course, we always want to acknowledge our NECAF's leadership, because without that, this project never would have happened. So, and then I should say that what happened when Annie wasn't here when we started this, but when she joined the project, she's really seen it to the end to get it completed. So just acknowledge Annie and all of the hard work that she's been doing on this. Yes?
Because I'm really interested in doing some of this. Was this a separate XOF from?
No, this is just part of NECAFs. So.
I guess I would interject that if you could leverage this and integrate your stuff with our stuff, we would prefer that, because the clearinghouse is an example. The clearinghouse started with a research thing, with a resource page, and then we realized that everyone could do this type of thing, and Annie is a reference librarian, has the skills to be better access, and she's trying to find better queries tools. And so we now nationally, part of the contributions that NECAS had to the national effort of SDOT regional is the clearinghouse, and we've worked all of those skills. So when I talk about hearing your critique about the tool to make it better than you did under you, I think that can better maximize.
Yeah. So I just wanted to kind of give a history for some people who might be new, just so you kind of know where we came from and how we got to where we are now. And so this is sort of a timeline of the different meetings where this sort of launched from, the different NECAF's annual meetings. I didn't have the first meeting on here because I didn't go to that meeting, so I started in 2018. And so I don't really know exactly, I don't think we really came up with these subgroups during the 2018 meeting. So that's where my reference point is, and that's where I've started this. So we have the NECAF's meetings listed here, and then I'm going to go through some of the project milestones at each of these meetings. So in 2018, we met in Baltimore, Maryland, and that's when we formed these subgroups, as I said. So we had 3 priority areas that we identified. We identified awareness, evaluation, and this resources subgroup. And at the time, we just identified that we needed resources, but we didn't really define what that meant or how we could contribute within our working group. But we did form these initial working groups and kind of got a list of people who said, oh, I can help out with this. And so then in 2019, what we did that whole year between 2018 and 2019 was work on a project proposal. And at the 2019 meeting in Albany, New York, is where we presented our project proposal for developing what we called at the time was the Roadmap to Resources, and that's become this Processor's Food Safety Toolkit. So I just want to make sure that when we're talking about the Processor's Food Safety Toolkit, it's the same thing that we used to call the Roadmap to Resources. So just for people who have been here along the timeline, that you know that this Roadmap to Resources has morphed into the Processor's Food Safety Toolkit. We just felt like the latter name made more sense to food processors by calling them out directly. And so packaging it that way for a forward-facing project made more sense. And we came up with problems that we needed to address with resources and then a plan. So some of the problems that we had identified through our NECAF's meetings was how do small processors know what resources they have to find? How do small processors know where to locate those resources? When they find those resources, how do they know whether or not they're actually reliable? Because we know there's a lot of things out on the web. So do you know if what you found is really what you should be going by? And then how do small processors know who to talk to and who to ask for help? So our plan was to develop this roadmap toolkit to address small processors who are impacted specifically by the Preventive Controls for Human Food Rule under FSMA, and connect them to the relevant resources. And our idea was that there are these resources out there, so let's take what already exists and try to build a catalog of them under specific sort of categories that we wanted to define together as a group, and that would address those needs of these small processors, and then electronically publish this so that we could distribute it more widely. And then that brought us to the 2020 meeting in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And this is where we finalized our categories that we wanted to include in the toolkit. And we also developed a rubric so that we could do peer review for assessing those resources to make sure that all the resources that are included on the site get vetted, so that when processors go to pull those resources, they've at least someone's looked through them and make sure that they're current, make sure that they're relevant, and they have accurate information. And I'd have to say we started with a template from Amanda Kinchl's program for this rubric, and then we built it out from there to address what we were looking for. And then in 2021, shortly after the meeting in Philadelphia, of course, COVID hit. And so our next couple of meetings were remote. But in that time between 2020 and 2021, we were able to identify a pool and start reviewing and cataloging some of the resources, and they started building the website. And then at last year's remote meeting, the website was, we were starting to build it, and then we started to pilot and then launch the website with the actual toolkit. So this is the website, and we have the URL for the NECAF's website there. We also have a QR code that you can take a picture of, so you can pull it up on your phone. And we are going to go through a little demo just to kind of preview the site for you, so that you can see what it's like a little bit. So here is the home page. And oh yeah. There we go. So you can see at the top, we have the navigation bar. We have a home, about us, contact, FAQs, and our resource categories that we pulled. So that's the FAQs is something that for just frequently asked questions that people might have, just general, like there are about 7 questions about preventive controls and whether or not they have to comply with them. And then if you scroll down, we have the connect to resources. So these are 3 main sort of categories for someone who's just arriving at the site. There's a beginner's guide, we have the FAQs again, and then talk to someone. The talk to someone is a directory, so that you can find people who work in food safety. It's basically, it's just a directory of everyone across the Northeast is what we have. Yes, you can volunteer to put yourself in this. So I think if you link to it, go rogue. There is a place, I think, at the bottom of the page that you can add yourself. Is that right? Yes. So you can submit your contact information. So everyone in this room, if you want to be reached by your stakeholders, head to the website and you can put your name in the directory. And so, yeah, we have people in the Northeast. I think we even have people outside of the Northeast that are listed in there. So, and
We originally was currently focused in the Northeast, but we had discussed,
Our original launch is Northeast centric, but we have had discussions of widening that scope so it would be nationally relevant.
yeah. Yes. Is it mostly extension people? We have consultants, we have extension personnel, and I think we even have some regulatory agencies in there as well.
Okay. Thanks.
And then the categories that we had come up with are all listed here. So we have complying with the PCHF rule, good manufacturing practices, allergens, so pretty much like all the big points that hit in the PCHF rule. We also do some with linking people to state resources as well, since we know that from state to state there can be variation in some of the regulations. Some funding opportunities, and we also do another just general extension and consulting services in case someone doesn't get it to their person through talk to someone, provide some options. And then I think Annie's going to pick one of these categories. And so this is good manufacturing practices. This is their headers with different sort of topics. And so you'll have like the title for whatever it is. So, and then you can, if you select it, then you'll have a link that'll come up to the actual resource. But it also includes this cataloged information with the author, the source, a summary of what the article is, when it came out, what language it's in, the category that it falls under the website, and then these keywords. And so these are just different ways. The keywords are you can also select to help navigate through the site, where to pull up any of these articles that are tagged with those keywords. Then you can have a full list of articles in case the article you had gone to didn't have what you wanted. You can also, I think, view by category to pull up all the resources. And I don't know, Annie, was there anything else on the site you think? So I think it's... Oh, and then there's also just the general guide, a beginner's guide. And so this has all of the categories listed too, but it kind of goes through and has a more descriptive what the categories are and some of the, maybe like an article that summarizes that category. just to give people a general idea who might be new and kind of want more of a guided way through. So that's kind of like the two ways that you can navigate the site. You can either do this sort of guide view to go through the different categories, or you just go to the homepage and you know what category you want to investigate, then that's the one you can hit up. So I think that's good. I just want to make sure that you guys saw what has been a really fruitful project, and Annie's going to go through. We did, as I said, we piloted and reviewed it. Oh, Byron.
I just have a quick question.
Yes.
So I did see some Spanish on the website, right? So on the reach out to somebody or something, there's a portion there aside. Are there any contacts for people that speak other languages? Any, directing to somebody that speaks Chinese or Spanish or whatever? That's one question. Then the other one is, who's doing these translations, or maybe more importantly, who's validating the accuracy of the translation, right, from a technical perspective?
So I will say that we don't. The contact list is all voluntary, so it's just people who self-submitted. So we don't have anyone specifically that we've sought out who can speak those different languages yet. But that's a really good point, and that's one of the sort of, Annie's going to get into this because she's going to be talking about the user testing that we did and with the piloting, about some of those gaps that we've identified. And so I think she'll circle back to the language question. And then what was your second question? Was the, sorry. About vetting those resources that are in the different languages.
Right, yeah.
Okay.
The context and then who's translating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't think we have a ton of resources that are translated, but we're not actually translating the resources. They're resources that are already out there. And I think from some of them, they're direct translations of other resources that are up. So I'll let Annie take over from here.
Thank you so much, Beth. And yeah, her points about language are correct. All we have for non-English right now is translated resources that we were able to vet in English. It's something that would be wonderful for version 2.0 is to bring in somebody who's qualified to do that language work, because it is a shortcoming that we have right now, and it's something that I think is sorely needed. Okay, so we built the site, which is great, but is it any good? Who knows? We recruited 17 small and very small processors to do a paid user experience survey of the site. So they tested out the site, ran through some scenarios, and provided their feedback. Some of the feedback that they gave that we have already incorporated is to make the FAQ section more visible, which is why you see it listed in two places. Adding a broken link bot, so when things break down, we know about it right away and can address it, and renaming the sections to be more transparent. We started with the roadmap to resources because that made sense to us, but they wanted something more direct, like a beginner's guide and talk to somebody. So that's what we were able to do. Some of the feedback we got for future updates, that's a little bit more labor intensive, which is why we're sort of looking at this for future implementation, would be to create a responsive user guide where users can sort of select some of the things they're more interested in, and then we more directly hand them materials that they think suit those needs. And improving the search feature so that you can't just search by keyword, but you can just search by any term and be able to find results that way. We also did a peer review survey, so we asked our food safety communicator community to look at the site and specifically look at the resources and the quality of the resources to see if they were of good quality and if there was anything that we needed to improve. So of the 12 food safety communicators who participated in the survey, they found that the resources were of good quality, but they made some recommendations for ways we can improve. One of the things they recommended is adding more languages and more formats so we could accommodate both different users and different learning styles, and to create, or really to find, resources specifically about individualized topics. So I think I talked about this a little bit yesterday as well, but processors tend to prefer topics and resources that address one thing rather than the big picture. And so finding more of those very dedicated topics is something that would be beneficial to them. They also sort of had some, our food safety communicators had some broader suggestions. So maybe creating short introductions to the topics to orient users on the site before sending them out to resources, or kind of it's funny, we sort of saw two different directions. One is paring down the site to be so bare bones that we just introduce them to the barest minimum of topics. And the other sort of current was to create a really, really detailed guide that walks processors through every single step. These are sort of two different currents of thoughts, and we haven't really addressed them yet. It's something that we need to reflect on and explore as we build the site bigger. But I can tell you how the site's doing so far. We did what we call a soft launch in May, and then our more formal push out in August. So you can see that August where we really started sending out social media posts and emails about it in the user statistics there. But we have gotten 655 unique users for 1,117 visits, 3,370 pages, and an average time of 1 minute and 39 seconds, which is pretty decent for typical site use. Our top 3 resources are on guidelines for validation, writing SSOPs, and basic FAQs of FSMA. So these all kind of make sense with what we would expect our average kind of introductory processor to be using. The top 3 topic areas of those 12 topics that Beth walked you through are complying with the PCHF rule, validation studies and processes, and GMPs. So this is really helpful for us to know, to understand what are people really interested in and what do we really need to make sure we have the strongest resources and the strongest guidance on. Ongoing outreach. So now that we have the site built, our goal is to get the word out about it, to connect to people about it. And so we've got 2 approaches. One is connecting directly to processors, and one is connecting to the larger food safety community. It's you. You're the slide. We've done things like attend the 2022 Fancy Food Show to speak directly to small and very small processors and get their perspective and tell them about the site. We've also been working with AFTO, and I'm happy to say Brenda Morris told me this morning that AFTO sent out a newsletter that included a video promoting the toolkit to its members, so that's something we're really happy about. We'll also be speaking to them in March. We'll be speaking to the North Central region in March as well. So it's really just this campaign to get the word out, to make sure people know so that they can share the toolkit with their stakeholders, as well as sharing it directly with the stakeholders. With that in mind, we would love your help in sharing the word about the toolkit. This is something that we've put a lot of time into and that we are passionate about continuing its improvement and its growth. And the more feedback we can get and the more spreading of the word we can get to make sure people know about this resource is something that we're really excited about. So we've got it's confusing to use the word toolkit twice, but nonetheless, we developed a social media toolkit that has sample posts, links to all of our accounts, and things that make it easier for you if you're willing to share this resource with your community. And so that's what we have there. I think that covers everything, and unfortunately we don't have time for questions, but we will sort of have some discussion during our break later. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Annie. And I want to just take a pause and state I forgot to embarrassingly also introduce Beth when she came up for the talk. And but it was instrumental to have Beth spearhead this, particularly keeping all of the efforts moving forward to actually produce this. And I think the relationship that the collaboration between Annie and Beth was really instrumental of getting this done. And we look forward to the discussion later on to capitalize on this. We want to transition here to also talk about our evaluation efforts. So I'm going to ask Nicole Richard from the University of Rhode Island to come up and speak about how we're launching our regionally developed tool about the preventive controls rules. So take it away, Nicole.
Okay, good. Now to go back. Oh, I guess I don't have to go back. It's just a cover slide. Okay, so way back in 2000, what year was it, Beth? I forgot. 18. We had a meeting and we did some brainstorming. And in doing that brainstorming, we came up with 3 target areas to work on as different, break apart into groups and work on them. And the evaluation work group was one that I joined. So I've been sort of spearheading the effort. There were a lot of people involved in developing the evaluation tool. I don't have a slide with everyone's names. But we essentially developed this tool, and then we validated it by sending it out to other educators and extension specialists or people with survey experience, and sort of validated the survey, got their feedback, incorporated that into the final tool. But the goal of this evaluation is to identify knowledge gaps when people take the preventive controls for human food training, so that we can sort of determine, do we need to point them to resources that are developed or what needs to be developed. So we really wanted to just focus on difficulties around the training with smaller processors that are less experienced. So what have we done? We've developed the training tool, and right now we're sort of promoting its usage. And then once we get more people to use it and collect more data, we can compile the data and start really looking at, where some deficiencies might be. So you can access the tool. It's both a PDF, so you can print it and hand it out if you're doing an in-person class, or you can access it online, and the website is on this slide. But it's on the Preventive Controls for Human Food Toolkit slide. So you can access everything there. If you have any questions, you can always reach out to me if you're using it. So essentially, this evaluation tool, we sort of asked about the workshop format because, it's offered in person, it's offered virtually, so we wanted to get some basic information. What's the respondent's job function? What foods are they manufacturing? And then we wanted to find out, compliance with the FSMA Preventive Controls for Human Food rule. What are they doing? What have they done? We have them do a little self-rated knowledge, and then topic areas where they need more information. So the data is intended to provide a regional picture of where deficiencies might exist so that we can address them as a region, as a nation. It's not, it's a lot of, we focus on the Northeast, but we're also finding that we're expanding to include, everyone that wants to work with us on these issues. But the data will be integrated with regional and national efforts that people can use to identify, projects to work on. And then for participating, well, I'm hoping people will participate, but ultimately we'll send you a summary of your workshop, and then we'll send you annually a national picture of all of the data that's gathered. So I'm hoping that's enough of a carrot because I don't have a lot to entice people right now. But if anyone has ideas of how I can entice people, please share it. But I'm really just getting, now it's like the point where I just go out and I'm trying to get people on board to use this evaluation tool. So that's it in a nutshell. And if you have any questions or you want to use the tool or any questions about the tool, my contact information is on the slide. Please reach out, and I'm happy to help. Thank you. Okay.
Any questions for Nicole or Beth or Annie about the current efforts within the working group of PC? Okay. One comment I do want to make about the evaluation, since I've been here since 2017 in the early years of NECAVs. One thing that we found, particularly with the preventive controls programming, is that the FSPCA's national evaluations, we didn't have as better access to how the performance or evaluation knowledge within that, because it's national and we weren't having access, and the response rate is really low, which is kind of what provoked us to try to determine where can we centralize the information so that we can better monitor. And then hopefully, as we start to see where knowledge gaps are with those evaluations, using the same tool, we can look at ourselves individually by state and also as a region to then find the new gaps so that we can start filling a pipeline with the resource tools that Beth and Annie had just described. And so that's kind of some of the incentives of other efforts on that. And so the only other thing I would say is that if you're thinking about outreach projects, I would encourage you to talk to Annie, who has lots of great, powerful tools to articulate where those needs are, because she has the analytics for that to support it. So if you're looking for projects or need to justify the means, that is the other initiative for these efforts, is to try to show where the gaps are so that we could then get the support to actually execute those things. So just food for thought. Okay, so now thinking about the next thing we want to transition into is thinking about successes that we've seen or tricks of the trades of creativity of trying to reach this hard to serve audience of small processors. And so the next part of our agenda is exploring projects with creative approaches to implementation and their success. And so I'm happy to invite a few casted characters to the stage. And in a similar form to the lightning round, what I'm going to propose is I'm going to announce everyone's name now, and then we'll keep on going through after. We'll have all the presentations, and then I'll open it for questions. So with us today, we have Byron Chavez from the University of Nebraska, and we've got Matt Krog in the back from the University of Florida, Nicole Richard, who you just saw, but you get to see her again from the University of Rhode Island. And virtually, we will also have Abby Snyder from Cornell University and Sam Elkane from Cornell University. So without further ado, I will transition to have Byron join us on the stage.
Good morning, everybody. Let me start my timer. I don't actually know how much time I have for this presentation, so I guess I'm going to talk for 10 minutes. Okay, like Amanda said, I am Byron Chavez from the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, so pretty far away from the Northeast, but, here I am. And today I'm going to talk about, let me see if I can move this. Yeah, sorry, I need to be seen because I'm very short. Okay, so today I'm going to talk about one of my EPSA projects. Thanks, NIFA, for the funding. I will talk a little bit about what have been some of the outcomes so far and also challenges that I've had with this project. So this one in particular was to help processors develop food safety plans with many more, let's say, practical resources, right? So when people come to the how do I advance the slides? Great, yeah, okay. When people come to courses, of course, we know they come to the PCQI course. This is foundational knowledge, but it's still pretty basic, right? And so when they come to the course, there's not a lot of resources on how to actually implement things, right? So when it comes to allergens or when it comes to environmental monitoring, process controls, and validations, etc. Right. So the long-term goal of this project is to help increase FSMA regulatory compliance of small and very small food facilities. Now, when I first submitted this project with my colleagues that I didn't introduce, but they were on the first slide, I will show their faces here. When I first submitted this project, I reached out to collaborators at the University of Guam and the University of Puerto Rico. And so those are two U.S. insular areas that we've been working with. Of course, we got the money in fall of 2019, and then COVID hit, and a lot of this money was really to go to places, right? And so we couldn't do those things. So I'll tell you a little bit about what are some of the things that we've done instead of a lot of traveling, even though I continue to do a lot of travel for this. So the whole idea of this project was to develop modules that would help implement FSMA preventive controls for human foods and give people a little bit more practical experience on these things. So we developed a module on hazard analysis and risk assessment that focuses on hazard identification and evaluation and software demonstration for people to use to be able to rank hazards, for example, or start doing some kind of qualitative risk assessment for food safety decision making. And I have a colleague, Bing Wan, from the University of Nebraska, who's an expert on risk assessment. We have a module on process controls, and those process controls are basically how to interpret microbiological data. So things like microbiological indicators, what is a surrogate, when can you use how to interpret a pathogen positive, for example. So we've been developing some content on that. Then we have a module on food allergen management with my colleagues Joe and Melanie, who are allergen experts at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. And we have a module on environmental monitoring that I lead. And so for that, we talk a lot about Salmonella and Listeria, sampling and testing for a robust environmental monitoring project. And that is a little bit of a continuation of a former EPSA project that I had that was to actually go to facilities in Nebraska, collect samples, and help them develop their environmental monitoring programs, which was really cool. Okay, as I said, of course, COVID hit. We had a number of plans to travel, right? And so a lot of this money was going to be used to go to places outside of Nebraska, namely Puerto Rico and Guam, right? So then what I did was, okay, when I first decided, okay, what am I going to do with the money, right? Because we cannot really go places. Guam was shut down. Puerto Rico was shut down. There were a number of challenges with this, particularly going into facilities, which was one of our goals, right? Go to the universities, but also go into facilities. And people were not allowing, external people. Food facilities were not allowing external people to come into their operation, so it was very difficult. So what I did was to switch this to an internship program for students from Guam and Puerto Rico to come to the University of Nebraska and have experiences in food safety extension. And so far, that is the ad that was circulated. So far, I've had 3 students from Puerto Rico that have come to Nebraska, and there's 2 that will join. Actually, this week I had a student that got stranded yesterday in Houston because there were 16 inches of snow in Nebraska, so they couldn't fly. But this has been an interesting switch, I guess, when it comes to the funding and the opportunities, right? One of the goals that we had was to develop strong collaborations with the University of Guam and the University of Puerto Rico, and bringing the interns has actually been really, really beneficial for that program. So here, a few pictures of my interns and their families, and I'll show you many more pictures in a little bit. We have had trips to Guam and Puerto Rico, 1 to each place, and we will do another trip in the summertime to deliver some more of the content. These are some you guys may know: Maria Plaza from the University of Puerto Rico, and Jian Yang from the University of Guam, and Clarissa Barcenas, who's an extension educator at the University of Guam. And these are workshops that we did last week that I was in Guam. So let me tell you just a little bit about the challenges. As I mentioned, COVID, recruitment of PR and Puerto Rican students, right? Amanda and I talked about this yesterday. We had the funding, we had the advertisements, but it's not that easy, right? Who would want to come to Nebraska in the middle of winter from Puerto Rico or Guam, right? It is a little challenging. And then identifying actual food safety training and education needs in Puerto Rico and Guam was something that at the time that I submitted the grant, I was really naive and or stupid because that's something that needed a little more effort, and I relied a lot on the collaborators, but I should have been a little more active on that. But there are some accomplishments. Of course, as I said, the intern program that I have. The University of Guam collaborators came to IAFP in 2022, funded by this grant. We had an exploratory trip to Puerto Rico in December. My colleagues, Melanie and Gary Sullivan, came with me, and then we had training sessions in Guam last week. When it comes to the dissemination of content, there's several things that have been done, particularly GMP courses, virtual environmental monitoring courses, a food safety webinar series that I developed that it's called the Food Safety Lunch Hour with Dr. Byron Chavez, and it's my face in an actual lunchbox, which is pretty cool. Then we have Allergen Fundamental virtual course that was partially developed with funding from this project, an environmental monitoring course in Spanish that will be delivered in Puerto Rico in June or July. And then what's in progress, scholarly work around food safety practices and training needs in Puerto Rico, which I think it's really cool. We're turning a lot of these internship experiences into something publishable, right? So we're conducting surveys in Guam, for example. We're doing a literature review of microbiological safety status of foods in Puerto Rico. And so the students will have something, right? Not just the experience, but something that it's more permanent, like a publication. We have a guidance document on foreign material control that came from the module of hazard analysis, and we identified that people had a lot of issues with foreign material. And then we have upcoming training visits to Puerto Rico and Guam this summer. And you guys can hate me as much as you want. These are some pictures on top of Puerto Rico in December and Guam just last week. And so with that, thank you very much.
Thank you, Byron. Come on up, Matt.
All right, well, good morning, everybody. As she said, my name is Matt Krug, and I'm with the University of Florida. So much like Byron, I'm not from the Northeast Center, but I'm here and happy to talk about my project and happy to see some temps below 70 degrees in January. Anyways, we have an FSOP project from 2019 that is a combination of my team at University of Florida and FIU down in Miami. And I'll talk more about that next slide. And I should add, I'm not based in Gainesville. I'm based way down in South Florida. And the whole project is related to shared use kitchens and developing curriculum and workshops for that target audience of members of shared use kitchens. And that's much because when I started my job 6 or 7 years ago at this point, I was tasked with, there was a facility about 10 minutes from my office called the Culinary Accelerator at Immokalee. When I started, it was just an empty shed. But they had this vision of building it out and getting members in there, much like the incubators or accelerators or other kitchens that you may have in your own state. They've become quite popular. So that's not owned by University of Florida, but they wanted me to help and ultimately implement extension programs with those people and expand it around the state, as I have a statewide appointment. So early on, I was building relationships with folks and learned that FIU, which is a state university over in the Miami area, also had an incubator kitchen that's actually on one of their campuses on Biscayne Bay. And so I met the professor over there and realized we should probably do something together and work together, because they're doing similar things to me, although they don't technically have extension. But so I worked with him with the goal of what can we do for the members of these facilities, and then start to spread it around the state. So again, we were doing lots of, and are still and always doing, one-on-one consultations and helping the members in those facilities however we can. But how can we kind of organize that and put it into some way that we can come up with unified workshops for that target audience? So some of our goals, of course, as an extension person, we're always doing surveys, collecting data, and I think it was Annie who gave the presentation of a needs assessment, and a lot of the results in there, I was like, oh, that's pretty. If I would have showed a graph of what our surveys look, it's very similar. Like, have you ever heard of FSMA? And no, for the most part, things like that. But taking that survey data and just really talking with the clientele one-on-one, using evaluation feedback from past FSOPs or other projects that have similar or related workshops. And we started to see common themes of people writing, we're tired of sitting here staring at a PowerPoint all day, and more hands-on discussion-based activities, which I can certainly agree with and put as my project team aspirations, as well as we wanted to get rid of PowerPoint a little bit, which is certainly relevant as you all have sat here and watched PowerPoints for the last day and a half. Certainly there were some gaps in knowledge related to food safety and regulations with that audience. Again, very varying depending on who you were talking to or working with, but and it's not necessarily they weren't doing the right thing. Like, a lot of those people understand food safety, took Serve Safe, maybe some other classes, but just really had no idea what regulation they were actually following, is what I started to realize. And we needed to increase their knowledge there, just so they knew what to do and how to move forward with their business. So that's the big thing, is preparing those businesses for growth in the future, because the goal of those shared kitchens is hopefully that they graduate and move to their own facility one day, but then as they have more sales, they may encounter more regulations or buyer requirements. I think I covered that pretty well. I'll add, so some of our goals as the project team, again, was to limit PowerPoint as best we could, provide adequate education, certainly in subject areas such as cleaning and sanitation and allergen controls. That was a big concern of mine, was when we look at a shared environment, you may have 15 businesses in there working, and what is the cleaning and sanitation protocol between those businesses? So while we do ultimately cover all of the preventive controls in an overview, we spend the most time discussing, I'd say, those areas, because I want them to at least understand that those steps in their process flow are very important. So yeah, introduce them to the preventive controls as well as county extension agents. A challenge I fight in my state is a lot of the agents, they're stuck in their cottage food or Serve Safe world, which is nothing wrong with that, but I want them to expand into to learn more of the regulations. And there was a FCS agent that talked this morning that said she was doing preventive controls, which made me jealous, because I wish we could get some more people to do that. So outcomes, I'll breeze through this because I've already been given the 5-minute warning. But again, we developed a curriculum, which is basically it starts with an overview of the state and federal food regulations, and then a condensed preventive controls overview, which is tough to do because it's extensive curriculum, obviously. But again, with the goal of just pulling out certain details like sanitation controls and what would that look like related to your own business if you were to end up doing a full food safety plan. We end up walking through a whole food safety plan after covering a hazard analysis. And then we spend as much time as we can on those more hands-on type activities, so group discussion. We purchased a lot of equipment. That's what a lot of our money was for, was that and travel. ATP meters, other tools, cleaning and sanitation tools, just so we can do demonstrations and have the people actually practice those techniques. And ultimately, we've conducted, it looks like 10 or 11 workshops at this point around the state, including one in-service training last year. So we're thrilled to finally reach that point. Now, one advance. Oh, too far. I think I had a slide. I think it's delayed, so I'm going to give it a second. There we go. So yeah, success is I could tell you about our knowledge gain numbers, but I think it's better to show pictures of people actually learning it and smiling faces here on the bottom. So again, we have kind of, we didn't reinvent the wheel. These are all pretty basic activities: pH, water activity, cleaning and sanitation, and of course group discussion. As you can see in Florida, a lot of times we can go outside and do it, which is nice. So yeah, I don't have a lot of time, so if you want to know more about the workshop, I'm happy to chat about it later. But just want to get into some challenges. Of course, much like Byron and everyone else will probably say, COVID was an impact. We were a 2019 award as well, which was also when USDA was moving a lot of things to Kansas City, so that delayed it. And then I think we got the money in May of 2020, which then we couldn't do anything for a while when our goal was to travel. But we had plenty of time to work on the curriculum, which was nice. So that's mainly delayed us. USDA has been gracious with no cost extensions, so really it's just pushed us back a little bit, but not a big deal there. As far as workshop and curriculum related, I've already mentioned it's a lot of information to cover in a short amount of time when you're taking a 3-day workshop and condensing it into less than a day and including activities. That's a lot. So you got to pick and choose what you really want to focus on for your examples and things like that. Certainly a broad range of clientele. So we have people show up that maybe are a caterer or a food truck, or on the flip side, acidified foods. And that's great. We want all this. We're excited that those diverse audiences want to actually come to this workshop. That's great, but it presents challenges in coming up with examples specific to them, certainly. And then marketing a unique workshop. So again, this is an audience that doesn't necessarily need to get a certification in preventive controls yet, because they're a smaller business and may have no idea of what that even is. And so how do we explain to them what are you going to learn and benefit in this workshop and get them to come? But I'd say for the most part, we have the good personal relationships with the kitchens around the state, and we've had no problem getting at least 8 or 9, if not more, people to sign up for each workshop, which is a pretty good number for a workshop like that. Except like 1 or 2 locations, for some reason, people don't sign up. But that's all right. We still have successes around the rest of the state. And with that, yeah, I'll stop there, but we can chat when we have questions later or over lunch or something like that. Thank you.
It's me again. So I just wanted to talk about an FSOP project that I got. It's from 2022, so we are just starting it. But essentially, it's, like all projects, it's a needs assessment. But this one's really focused on Rhode Island. So I offer these preventive controls workshops, and I'm getting a really low turnout in Rhode Island. And when I talk to the regulators, it just seems like they don't know to take this class. They don't know about the food safety plan. There's a lot of low knowledge. So I'm really hoping that with this FSOP grant, I'm going to partner with some local agencies in the state. There's the Manufacturing Extension Partnership, and I'm going to partner with them. And I'm really hoping that they have a strong connection with this manufacturing industry in Rhode Island, which they say they do, and that increases awareness. It gives me access to them, and it allows me to let them know, what the cooperative extension program offers. So ultimately, we're going to do this needs assessment and find out what they really want and need in the state of Rhode Island, and then it will be going back to the resources that we know are developed, and then prioritizing what's not developed to sort of see what Rhode Island needs. So it's really Rhode Island centric, which should be hopefully easy because it's a very small state. So, so we'll customize the training, and then ultimately this will be a training program we can sustain by meeting their needs, because they're not coming to the preventive controls for human food classes. And there's just this, and when the inspectors go in, they regulate them, and then they tell them to call URI, and they do, and I might get 3 calls a year. So they're not doing a lot of full inspections. So I'm just really hoping that this project enhances awareness of the rule, and that we're able to really get them more information so that they can comply. And that's it. So hopefully next year I'll have more to say on this project. But thank you. And now we're going to have Abby Snyder is going to be pulled up.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for the invitation to present here today. I wish I could be there in person, but I'm going to be sharing some findings from our FSOP project providing training to smaller food businesses eligible for qualified exemptions from the preventive controls rule. And most notably, we transitioned a lot of these trainings online during the pandemic. And so what I want to talk about is kind of what we found made successful virtual presentations. So this work started as a pilot project in 2019 while I was an assistant professor at Ohio State University. And in the pilot FSOP work, we offered this full 8-hour day of training to very small food businesses. So these very small food processors were eligible for qualified exemptions from that PCHF rule, but they were still subject to GMPs and some of the other specific documentation requirements. And in particular, the requirement for documented employee training and completion of the FDA attestation form for that qualified exemption. So the purpose of this training series was to kind of meet the needs for those very small food businesses for whom that 2.5-day PCQI course, which really focuses on subpart C and G of the rule, doesn't necessarily address those needs. And our feedback on these trainings was generally very good. There was a high level of interest in the content. We had good enrollment. But a consistent comment that we got on our course assessments was that the participants wished that the courses were shorter. Like, if you are a very small food business, it's hard to take a full day off work. There probably is not someone else at your food business who's going to be able to cover for you. And so for the full project, we proposed abbreviating that training into 3 hours or less. And at that point, I had transitioned. I was an assistant professor at Cornell University. So these courses were focused in the Northeast and the Midwest. And Dr. Olga Padilla-Zakor served as a co-investigator on that proposal. And we were funded, so that was wonderful. The project has since termed, so I'm actually at the end of this now. But in the beginning, I spent the first several months revising the curriculum. And I had just set up the first 3 trainings kind of back to back to back in the Midwest for March 2020. So on the first day of the training, the first day of the first training, Cornell announced that it was closing. And while I was giving that first session, the next 2 classes canceled. And there was a lot of uncertainty at that time about how long it would be before in-person instruction was allowed, let alone that it would be something that an external stakeholder would want to travel and participate in. At the same time, there was a lot of, interest and opportunities in virtual meetings and webinars in the early days of the pandemic. They were super well attended. I was going to some of these virtual workshops, and the participation numbers were just crazy. And so we also took a look at some stakeholder training preference data that we had gathered and published in that pilot program. And we stratified the results here based on business size. You can see that on some questions for some topics. Food business size doesn't really matter. But if you look at question 5, which we asked, do you prefer virtual or in-person trainings? And this was in 2019. You can see that if you were a very small food business, you really like the option of having a virtual training. And so that is what we did. After that first in-person training, everything else became a virtual option. And we really did a lot of this work early in 2020 when there was a real demand for this content. One, because people were at home, but also there were kind of some shifts in food production and gaps, right, in kind of consumer goods. And so I think we were able to capitalize on a lot of that interest in people's availability. And I'll also say we really benefited from in-state partnerships. So we relied on extension educators or farm market managers or leaders in shared use kitchens or commissaries to coordinate these trainings on our behalf. And we were super adaptable in format. So some trainings were kind of multiple short sessions a week apart. Some were longer talks followed by like a discussion panel or a round table with state food safety regulators. I really liked that format, actually. Some trainings had kind of follow-up office hour sessions with in-state personnel. And so we really just kind of did whatever our in-state partners said they thought would be best. And the flexibility of that virtual format allowed us to also provide some nice accommodations that we probably wouldn't have been able to otherwise. Like, we had not proposed this, but we were able to translate content into Spanish and hire a Spanish speaker to offer some joint presentations in Spanish as well. We made some like short series of these like 15-minute refresher videos that we shared with participants afterwards. Anyway, I think it was really gratifying as an instructor to be able to do so much adaptation of the content rather than kind of like always delivering the same thing in the same way. So yes, there are definitely some advantages to virtual education in terms of reach and your ability to recruit unique and diverse co-presenters and to offer a lot of linguistic and audio accommodations. But there are some drawbacks. You know, most extension education has been offered in person historically for a reason. And we did a lot of this assessment in a SWOT analysis, which has been an accepted manuscript, hopefully, which will be available to be published soon in a new journal called Food Safety Management and Practice. But just as an example, plain sec producers who don't use the internet are not going to be well served by this type of programming. And there are even non-plain sec producers who are less comfortable with technology for whom this is less ideal. So there's accommodations there as well. We had some sites have a dedicated IT person on the call, so they were able to handle a lot of those issues too. So we spent a lot of time as well thinking about engagement in virtual formats. And I think that there are some things that are straightforward practices like chat features and polls and breakout rooms, but some of this is also just soft skills. Like if you are a good and engaging presenter, that's going to matter a lot to participants. Like I eventually adopted the skill of being able to read a chat and talk at the same time. That really facilitated kind of engagement among presenters. So now in 2023, the landscape looks different than it did in 2020 in terms of virtual education. But I don't think virtual training is going away. I think that it's an abiding interest of mine to think about how to offer high quality virtual education. And that is certainly something I'm interested in talking more about going forward, and I'm happy to take any of your questions in the Q&A.
Hi everyone, I'm Sam Alkane, an associate professor in the Department of Food Science at Cornell University. I have a focus on dairy fermentations and dairy food safety, and I'm sorry I'm not there hanging out with everybody. I'm super jealous, but it kind of makes sense for the project that we're doing, which is a multimodal dairy food safety plan educational workshop targeted at small and medium-sized dairy producers, that I'm, talking to you virtually here. Now, I know we're all familiar with the FSPCA material for preventative controls for human foods. It's a great class. A lot of us here teach it, but sometimes it's a little difficult for small and artisan producers to wrap their heads around it. And in particular, for small dairy producers, there's not a lot of examples in the material that focus on cheese making, yogurt making, and things like that, and putting it in that perspective. So back in the day, we had an FSOP grant that was focused on holding in-person coaching workshops for artisan dairy producers to help them develop their food safety plans. So basically what we did is there were 2-day workshops We shortened some of the FSPCA material to cut out some of the repetition, put in dairy examples, and then we sat down with artists and producers to either help them start developing their food safety plans and understand these concepts, or review the current food safety plans that they had. And so we held these workshops in collaboration with universities across the country and some other dairy organizations. We had then food safety experts, around 2 to 4, come in for the workshops, and we had around 10 to 20 participants. And they were great. There was a lot of engagement. They were fun to do, got to meet a lot of people. But then in 2020, we ran into an issue, right? We all know the COVID challenge. And so travel was halted, and it was then really hard to execute or at any in-person coaching workshops. And that wasn't the only issue. You know, one of the things that popped up during these in-person workshops is that, you know, cheese makers, yogurt makers, you know, milk producers, right? The cows are 24/7. So getting away for, you know, 2 to 3 straight days to sit down and do a workshop is hard for an artist and producer anyways. So the question was there a better way we could deliver that education to them and potentially reach more people? So we decided to take this food safety rodeo virtual. Now, luckily, right, to hold all those in-person workshops, I built a really great network of food safety collaborators, and even though they'd already met me, they were still willing to work with me. Maybe even more so because they didn't have to meet me in person. But we reached out to this great team that, I'm not going to name everybody on here, but it spans from Maine down to North Carolina, from Maryland, across the Midwest to Oregon, and couldn't have done any of this without all the people and then some on this screen. So then what we did is we took those lectures that we were doing in person and turned them into online recorded lectures that we then put up on our website for people to take. Now, we had each of the modules recorded then by different food safety experts, so you weren't always listening to the same person. It also made it feel more like a community, because now, you know, an artisan dairy producer, if they went through all the modules, there was a chance that they were then going to encounter and hear from somebody, a food safety expert that was in their region, and by seeing and hearing them, they might also then be more comfortable reaching out to them later on with questions. Now, these online modules then were available to anyone who signs up for the course, and they're also available to anyone that had previously taken our in-person workshops. Again, because we want to make sure that, you know, if someone wants to go back and review this material, hear something, that it's easy for them to do at their own pace. Now, as part of this new FSOP grant, we didn't completely scrub the in-person workshops, but we definitely focused them. So instead of trying to go everywhere across the country to try to reach out to artists and producers, we decided it was better to focus where they were naturally congregating. So we worked in collaboration with the American Cheese Society and the North American Ice Cream Association. And what we did then is that we held focused one-day workshops that kind of focused on the key components of the food safety plan at the conferences that they hold each year. So the American Cheese Society usually holds their annual conference in the summer, so we ran it with them this past year in Portland in 2022, summer 2022. And the North American Ice Cream Association in 2021, we ran one with their conference in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. And then this past year in 2022, we ran it in Fort Worth, Texas. And so then anyone who took these in-person workshops also has access to the full online lectures to listen to those. And then afterwards, they have access to food safety experts through our virtual office hours. Now, one of the challenges for artists and producers is that you can take a bunch of online lectures, you can come back from an in-person workshop, you're still going to have questions, and you don't always want to shoot off an email, wait for a response, or leave a voice message for somebody. You just want to know that you can get a hold of a real person that can answer your question, or at least help you figure out a solution to your problem. And so what we've done is we then hold these virtual office hours over Zoom, where anyone who has taken the in-person workshops or done the virtual lectures can pop in and know that there are 2 hours every month that they can get a hold of a few food safety experts and ask questions. Now, we hold these office hours. There is usually a topic that they're focused on. It could be process controls, could be hazard analysis, but it's really an open forum to ask any question that you have on your food safety plan. We started these in September. We've been getting around 1 to 6 participants. Sometimes they're small artisan producers, sometimes they're distributors. We've had regulators on the call. And depending on the needs, we keep it kind of fluid. I usually have a backup deck that kind of highlights the key points of a certain topic if we want to go through those, or we just dive into questions. And sometimes those questions have led to an hour-long conversation that has been great, in-depth, people learning from one another. And I think they've been really rewarding for the people that have made them. I want more people to join in on the office hours. We bring together multiple food safety experts, so usually there's 2 to 4 of us on the office hours, again from across the country. And if there are artisan producers within your area that have questions, please point them our way. Now, not everyone is going to make every single office hour, or they may not be able to make the office hours at all, but you might have questions that have come up. So the next thing that we're doing now is I'm compiling some of the questions that come up during the office hours, and then we're going to have an FAQ page where then you can look for, certain questions. See, hey, has someone already asked this question? You can click on the question, and then you can see the answer that was provided during the workshop. So then we have this repository of FAQs that if you didn't want to make an office hour or couldn't, you can kind of go back and then look up the questions and potentially find an answer to the problem that you're having. So this is the next piece that we're building. Now, all of this stuff, the online lectures, the schedule for the in-person workshops and for the office hours can all be found at our Northeast Dairy Foods Research Center website if you click on Artisan Support. So if you go to cals.cornell.edu/ndfrc, you'll go to our landing page, click on that Artisan Support, and all the information there for the classes, the in-person workshops, and the office hours, and the FAQ, as that gets populated, will all be housed there. So please send people our way. Again, I couldn't do any of this without my collaborators, so a big thank you to Joanna, Joy, Stephanie over at Oregon State, Clinton, Stephanie at NC State, Tim at the Innovation Center for U.S. Dairy. I'll do a small thank to myself, and a huge thank you to all the food safety experts from across the country that have collaborated with us on developing those online lectures, helping out on the office hours, and then helping us with the in-person workshops. And a big thank you to USDA for funding this. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. My email is alkane@cornell.edu.
Okay, I just wanted to take pause here and thank all the speakers again today for giving snapshots of their work and open it up for questions. Does anyone have any questions? Abby Snyder is also on the line. So if anyone has any particular questions, we would welcome that now. Annie has a question. And actually, while we're waiting for Annie, I have a question for Matt in particular. 2 questions. You have food safety plans. Could you describe what type, sorry, Annie, what type of food safety plans you have in that portfolio?
Well, we just have stolen examples from ones we can find, but the one we created, there was a previous FSOP by my colleague Suan, who is no longer in her job, but she was originally on the grant when we started. And so it was just a modified version of a preventive controls full food safety plan that shows an example of each type of preventive control. And so we basically took that and just further modified it to change the language a little bit. So really we have that one full one that that's included in the notebook that we give people, and we kind of walk through as part of the class and pull bits and pieces of it and put it on slides to walk through.
Yep.
Much like you would do in an actual preventive controls class.
Which food did you use? Sorry.
It's like a eclair, I think, like a dessert.
Oh, baked good of something.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It was tough. The struggle was trying to find something that would make it an easy example to show each type of preventive control, which then makes it very complex when people don't really need to know all of that, but we just wanted to show the example.
Right.
So yeah, we have that, and I'm happy to share it if
okay,
wants to
thank
see
you.
it.
Yeah, I think we all struggle with that. What is a simple food that goes through the model without inundating the details? But I feel like we struggle with that as well. Annie, sorry, you can ask your question.
Hey, my question was for Abby. I wanted to ask, I guess, first, I think it's great that you were able to really sort of adapt your teaching model so broadly for all of these different audiences. But I wanted to ask how that impacted evaluation and really understanding the impact of these different formats and different speakers when trying to summarize your work.
Yeah, so we accepted the variability in evaluation as a consequence of doing the adaptation that we did. So because they were in so many different formats, I don't think it made sense to aggregate data across all of those formats. And so as we were workshopping the strategy with each of our in-state partners, we defaulted to what they recommended in terms of evaluation programs. So there were some states who said, look, this is a relatively short virtual engagement. We don't feel like there's enough built up trust with these participants for us to do a formal evaluation. And so there are some states for which we don't have formal evaluation data. Other states are doing a lot of virtual training and always do evaluations as part of that. And so we often use their format as part of the evaluation process. So just from a technical perspective, it super varied by state, and we defaulted to what the in-state partners preferred in those cases. But internally, right, as we start to assess, like, what does engagement look like in a fully virtual format, that's kind of where we did the more qualitative SWOT analysis piece. And I do think engagement matters, right? Because there's a potential to lose engagement in some of the virtual settings. Earlier in the pandemic, I think there was fewer distractions. People were a lot more focused in these virtual classes, but looking forward now, people can be checking emails. They're still at their job, doing some of these activities. And so the way we try to increase engagement in those cases is through things like continuous chat, questions, polls, breakout rooms, office hours, Q&A panels at the end. But I do think engagement in that capacity and also ensuring connection with the university system are the obvious potential drawbacks of virtual education.
Thanks, Abby. Any other questions for the group or for any of our speakers today? Okay, well, I want to thank you all again for sharing your work. It's very exciting and gives me comfort of thinking about all these different strategies to increase our reach to the community we're working with. So thank you again for sharing your work. We're going to take a quick break here. I'm looking at Annie because we're not off schedule, but we want to get into our spot. So the next thing we're going to do, we'll have a coffee break and then we'll reconvene here where we're going to do a SWOT. Abby, it's too bad you're not here because we're going to do a SWOT in a moment. So I guess what I'd like to propose is that we reconvene here in 7 minutes. So that, according to my clock, is at 10:41. So that should be a bio break and coffee break, whatever you need to fuel up. And then we're going to conduct a SWOT. So time out, refresh. We'll see you in a bit. Thank you.